Good morning. On behalf of the Pathology and Immunology Office of Faculty Development, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar this morning. I'm Ann Gronowski, Vice Chair of Faculty Affairs and Development, and I'd like to introduce Carrie Ann Burnham, our Vice Chair of Faculty Mentoring and Advancement for also for the Department of Pathology and Immunology. Today, we're looking forward to hearing Dr. Susan Johnson's talk entitled Managing Email Effectively. Dr. Johnson received her bachelor's, her master's, and her medical education at the University of Iowa, where she recently retired as Professor Emeritus of Obstetrics and Gynecology in the Carver College of Medicine. In addition to being a physician, Dr. Johnson served for 20 years in various administrative positions, including Associate Dean and Associate Provost for faculty and as the University Ombudsperson. She continues her work in women's health research as chair of the NIH-funded multi-center longitudinal cohort study of menopause, the study of women's health across the nation, or SWAN. Dr. Johnson has a long-standing interest in time management and productivity and has given more than 600 presentations locally and around the country to audiences at universities, nonprofit, and professional organizations and small businesses. She has a small business, Thriving Amidst Chaos, which offers workshops and coaching to individuals and small teams. And her website, www.thrivingamidstchaos.com, includes her series of articles on a variety of time management topics. So just a bit of housekeeping. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A or raise your hand. This is the second talk that Dr. Johnson has given. And so I think it worked pretty well for people to ask questions during the presentation. And of course, we'll have time at the end to entertain questions. With that, Dr. Johnson, it's a pleasure for me to turn it over to you.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. So today the plan will be to do an hour of prepared content, and then we'll have time for those who can stay for questions and possibly some demos in live Outlook about a couple of things that you might be interested in. Before we start though, I'm going to give you a small lesson on clutter. So I had to rearrange my video screen or my computer setup this morning because of a sun problem in the where it was sitting. And so now I looked over behind me and I could see that stack of books. There are actually 2 stacks of books. And so you may wonder, you may be thinking the whole thing about my credentials as a time management person if I can't even keep stacks of books off my office. But these books actually represent what is called a backlog, which means every book in those stacks, I don't want anymore. And I'm going to give them to a local place that takes books for resale or donation. But because of the pandemic, I have not been able to do it. So they've just been sitting there for a year. And they don't bother me because I know what's in there. So the thing about any pile you have, if you know what's in there and there's nothing that you have to do, it's okay to just let it sit as long as it's not visually distracting to your work. So with that, let's go to email. Now, I have to tell you, I love email. I love doing email. And it's because I have, over the years, developed a system, a consistent process that works for me to get through emails quickly, and have developed a mindset that allows me to now, after years of procrastination, to respond more quickly than I used to be able to do in the past. Now, before we go any further, this picture, which was drawn by my grandfather when he was 8 years old, is growing out of the top of my head, I realize. So I'm just going to go move that, and then I will be right back. Okay, there we go. Now, so what we're going to do today is talk about those processes that I use, but I'm going to embed that in a bigger picture of the strategies that I want you to think about developing for your own process, because yours won't look exactly like mine. I'll show you mine as an example, and then we'll go for there. Now, so let me jump over to slides, and here we go. So once again, these slides will be available to you posted, I think, but one way or the other, you'll have these available later. If you want to send me questions about this topic or any other in the series or that you have in general about time management and productivity, there's my email address. You can just send that right to me. And there's my website address. So there we have it. Now, it probably isn't necessary to really enumerate the problems that email can cause us in our working life. There's too much of it. There's too much that comes to you that you do not need to look at or want to look at. And in addition to that, there's all kinds of ways in which the way different people use email that's problematic. So people who send an email and expect a response within 10 minutes, and then when you don't respond, they keep sending you emails until you finally do. Or at the other extreme, people who don't reply to your emails in a timely way. And so you sit with some question or need for information that lasts, 2 weeks or so, and then you have to worry about getting back to them to nudge them. There are no agreed upon conventions about how emails should be composed to make them more useful for the recipient. And then, as I said, the volume just keeps going up as institutions and others communicate more with email. So there we have it. That's all that stuff. So here's the reality-based situation. We can't control any of that. You can do a little bit about, controlling how much emails that you don't actually want to see come into your email with filtering and unsubscribing and volume reduction techniques. So that's true, but you can't change how other people do emails. You can't change how your institution does what they decide to send you. So what we're going to focus on in this section is just things that are under our personal control. Because I've learned that if I do the most that I can to control my own process, the other stuff doesn't actually bother me as much as it otherwise might. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and I want to go through these principles. Each thing I'm going to talk about in this section is open for, is an opportunity at some point to have a discussion about how you might implement these things. I think we're going to save that though, because I would like to go to the process part. And then when I'm finished, there will be time for more discussion about these elements. And then for people who can stay, we can pursue them even further. So the first big principle that I want you to think about adopting is to not even look at your inbox during the day unless you have time to process or do something useful with at least one message. Now, by processing, what I mean is reading just enough of the message to decide what you need to do, and then either doing it or deferring it to later. Now, this is in contrast. So the idea would be that when you look at your email, you have enough time to at least do something useful, rather than the alternative approach that most of us have used or use, which is to check our email. Checking email means you look at your email inbox, you scan up and down to see what's there. You see something that looks really complicated and you shudder. You may open a few things, but you close them because you're not in a position to answer them. And then you close it, and then you come back and do it half an hour later or an hour later. But in all this time you're spent checking in that way, you're not actually doing any work. And worse, you're actually increasing the level of anxiety that you have about all those messages that you know are in there and you have done nothing about them. So only looking at your inbox unless you have some time to do something useful is the first thing I want you to think about doing, because if you can do that, you will reduce the amount of distraction that email causes you by a considerable amount. Now, the second big question then that this leads to, of course, is how often should you be working in your email, that is processing? And you'd like me to give you like an exact answer so that you can go out and try it out. But unfortunately, there is no exact answer that fits everybody's needs. So so I think we could agree that if you're looking at your as at the frequent end of the spectrum, as shown on this graphic, if you're looking at your email literally a couple times a minute, well, we would all agree that you should only be doing that if you're a help desk person, right? Someone who's responsible for immediately triaging emails or answering them. But for the rest of us, that would just destroy your ability to do anything else. And then at the other extreme, if you're unresponsive to email, you only actually go in and work in your email once or twice a week. That obviously doesn't work either, because other people depend on their interactions with you, and you obviously need to use it more often than that just to get your work done. So that's not good. But so for everybody out there in the world will needs to come up with some solution about frequency that fits somewhere between these two extremes. Now, when I say that everybody is going to have different needs, I don't mean every single person has different needs, but different kinds of work call for different solutions about frequency. So let me give you 3 examples. One, which we do not find anywhere in academic medicine, is someone like the successful self-employed novelist who only has that one job. So that novelist probably actually doesn't have a need to look at email very often. And once or twice a week is probably plenty, because their agent, if something exciting emerges about a contract, will call them probably. So that person really doesn't have any need to look at email very often. At the other extreme, if we eliminate people whose job it is to triage emails in the moment, well, let's go to so a faculty member in the English department at the University of Iowa does conduct various kinds of business through email, both scholarly and service related, and teaching, of course. And they need to look at their email, work in their email maybe twice a day if they can do that, because they probably have the ability to set aside a couple of big chunks of time. And a couple times a day is probably going to work just fine for someone with that kind of a schedule who it's not that they're not working hard, it's that they have control over their time to a large extent and can make decisions about when they're going to look at their email. Now, next we have many of you who are listening today, and those are clinicians or basic scientists who have a mix of kinds of things that come in email. And you probably need to, you're probably going to be either in that twice a day group or maybe 3 or 4 times a day, depending on how much more urgent stuff comes in that that you'll need to do with, based on perhaps a lab group or a clinical service where you get emails about things on a more regular basis. The busiest group in academic in an academic medicine setting would be someone who has a lot of administrative responsibilities. And this is true whether or not they are clinicians. So anybody who has a big time administrative responsibilities needs to get into their email more often. So in the many years I spent doing three different administrative jobs, sometimes while also working as a clinician and sometimes not, I actually tried to go into my email when it was possible, at least once an hour. But when I did that, I wasn't just checking my email. I would take the time to try to finish up dealing with every message that was in the inbox. So we'll be talking about this inbox zero idea in a minute as a basis for developing a practice, if you like. And I basically practiced inbox zero nearly by the hour or every couple of hours, because in an administrative job, your fellow administrators around are conducting business through email in more like an instant messaging kind of way. You need to get responses quickly about administrative things, and the people that you're communicating with need that too. So those are kind of the range. And so what I want you to do is think about your current situation and how often you are currently on average checking your email. And then think about, over time, what would be the longest period of time that I could go that's safe from a business point of view, that is based on the kinds of messages I get, that I could go without looking at my email at all. And try to stretch that out as long as is possible. So those are just my sort of schematic conceptual ideas about this issue. Now, the final thing is that one of the other ways in which email can not just be a distraction, but can actually impede our ability to do that high priority work, project work that we talked about in the last session. So for those of you who weren't there, what I mean by that is when you're writing a paper or doing research or analyzing data or in the lab doing an experiment, if you let yourself be available for email during those times, that is not only distraction, but it destroys your concentration and makes it harder to do quality work efficiently or at all. And so the third thing I'd recommend is that when you are going to be doing that kind of work that requires deep concentration, whatever kind it is, turn off your email and your phone email so that you cannot be interrupted. Now, here's the thing. If you're a clinician who needs to have a way to be, you have staff where emergencies come up, you need to have an agreement with people in your environment to let them know what a true emergency is that you can be interrupted by. But get your email off. Okay, so those are the three big principles about distraction and trying to eliminate or minimize email as a disruption of the rest of your work. So now we're going to talk about processing, and we're going to talk about it in two pieces. In order to have an effective processing system, you need to make decisions in advance and have a system set up for how you're going to store emails that you want to keep once you've done whatever you need to do with them. And that can vary quite a bit. I knew, this was several years ago, a clinician at the University of Iowa who also had a prominent administrative role. And his approach to emails was once he either read it or replied, he deleted the message. He deleted every single message that he got once he had dealt with it. He saved nothing. He said, well, if it's so important, someone else will have a copy of it. Now, this is an extreme version of the storage answer to the storage question. And it's not necessarily a good one for most of you, but it's hard to come up with a storage. You need a storage plan that does not take so much time to file or so much time to find that it becomes a burden. And so that what you end up doing is just leaving messages sitting in your inbox, even though you've dealt with them, where they really represent clutter. So here is, so far, what I understand to be the actual evidence from studies by computer scientists who study this kind of thing, of the relative merits of using a folder system versus search to retrieve messages that you have stored. And so what these studies do, I don't exactly know how they set up the method is, but in several small studies that were experimental in that people were asked to do something, in every single one of these studies in which looking for an email in a folder system versus search always proves to be faster. Search always proves to be faster. And so maybe that list of 500 deeply nested folders that you have isn't actually the best way to store emails. It's a question to think about. I will say that there's one more recent study that was just published about a month ago, and I have to read it in a little bit more detail, but this was a naturalistic study. It was done in a single company with a bunch of people where they had some way of monitoring how people were retrieving emails. I don't quite know how they did that, but in that study, it also proved to be true that the people who chose search did get emails back faster than people who used a folder system. So there you go. Now, the however is that I personally, although I have changed my practice substantially after learning sort of about these results, and I use many fewer folders than I used to use, I believe that for the work that there is a kind of a set of folders that can actually speed up retrieval for certain kinds of work. So let me describe that to you. You need to make your own decision in the end, of course, about how you're going to do this. So the storage options that then, just to summarize, you can use numerous hierarchical, specifically topic folders. And so that's what most of us have done for most of our careers. You could use the single folder for all saved messages. which means you'd have one folder that says something like messages I have read and I'm done with them, or something like that. You might think of something shorter. And so when you're finished with a message, you just put it in there. Now, I actually worked with a dean on campus once, and that actually proved to be the best solution for her, because she actually didn't need to retrieve emails because she had a full-time executive assistant who had access to all the messages, and she could find anything the dean needed. And so that was really the best solution for that person. For me, I use a hybrid system, as I suggested, was implying a few minutes ago. And I save most messages that I might want to refer to in the future in a single folder. But I have a limited number of folders that I use for specific topics that are related to things I'm currently working on. So essentially, these messages are part of projects, questions I've sent out to people, things that I'm going to be using regular, where I need access to those messages quickly. And searching may not always be the best way. So let's say, for example, I'm working on a group paper with people that are scattered around the United States. And I have one folder then for that paper where all the messages around that paper go in it. Now, if I were going to search I want to just see how many people have replied to how many responses I've gotten to my last question. So I go in, and instead of having to search for each person, I can just look in the folder and everything is there. So that's what I mean by current work, and by why retrieval and filing are actually easier with that system. Okay, so with no further ado, here are the folders that I use currently for my structure. And somebody has just popped up here with an obvious question. Is inbox 0 by the hour sounds great. Can I just say, hold on, don't panic. I won't be asking anybody to do inbox 0 by the hour. So I was just telling you what I used to do when I had time to do it. Okay, so just hang in there. We'll get to those questions, good ones. Okay, so this is my current folder system. This is an Outlook, the most recent version of Outlook, so Microsoft 365, the desktop version that we're looking at. Now, I don't know exactly which version you all use, but you'll see something similar to this. And the starred folder there, Archive, that is a folder that exists in the newer versions of Outlook. It's just a regular folder in the inbox called, in your mail space, called Archive. Just to be clear, this is not the same thing as archiving emails, where emails are put someplace else, which you can still search, but they're not in your regular server space. This is just a regular folder. You could make your own archive folder and just call it Archive. And so that's where I put all those messages I want to save, but I don't need to put them in a topical folder, Archive. And to get them there, just a second here. To get them there, when you click on a message on the subject line or have it open, you can this icon up here in the ribbon that says Archive. You just click that and it will zoom right down into that Archive folder. So let me just briefly describe each of these, and then I'll show you examples of these two middle ones. So the waiting for folder is a place where I put the message I have sent to someone else when I've asked them for something, a reply, information, whatever, and I need to hear back from them. So it's a tiny subset of regular sent items. It's just the ones where I need to follow up, basically, to be sure I got a reply. And the way I get things there are either to simply after I send the message, I go over to sent items and just drag it into waiting for. Or you can blind copy yourself, and then your copy will pop back in to the inbox and you can drag it over there. Those are the two simple, non-techie ways to do it. Let's look down here at the bottom. The optional reading folder is a place where, when I get things that come into my inbox that I'm interested in reading, but I don't have to. You probably get a lot of stuff like that. Maybe it's a newsletter, a professional newsletter, a table of contents that you subscribe to, but you don't necessarily look at it every time. articles that people send you that are interesting to you, but don't really have anything to do directly with anything you're working on. If I can't look at those right away and dispose of them one way or the other, I put them in optional reading. And you might say, well, that's going to get to be an awfully big file pretty quickly. And it could, but remember the key word here is optional. And so you have, the only things you should put in there are things that you actually, if you don't read them, it's not a big deal. But then they're all grouped together in one place, so you can go and pick and choose what you do want to read, and it gets it out of your inbox where it just represents clutter. Now, these remaining two folders, calendar event associated messages and project associated messages, are in different types of project folders, actually. So for those of you, we talked about projects last time. So this folder contains subfolders, each of which represents an individual project. And the calendar event associated messages, each subfolder in this group represents an event on my calendar that will have a substantial amount of email associated with it. And so I keep them separately just because that way I can look at the calendar stuff separately from the projects. And the list can get long, and that way I don't have to scroll down so far. You could combine them, but I find them more useful to do separately. Now, just to anticipate a question some of you may be having, that little @ sign at the beginning is simply a way of sorting these folders to sort together when you have the inbox in alphanumeric order. So, and they kind of jump out as these are the folders I'm going to want to be using. Okay, now let's look a little bit more at how the calendar event thing works. So this is from last year, I guess, a screenshot of my calendar event associated messages folder. And you can see the reason, the way to make this work the most effectively is to always name the subfolder with the date, and always write the date exactly the same way. So 4-digit year period, 2-digit month period, and a 2-digit day. And then if it's a longer term thing, just you can put the end date in, and then a description of what the event is. And so in these so with that system, then when these will sort so that the most recent, the next thing up is at the top of the list. And it's a quick way to kind of zoom down and see what's coming up that I might need to prepare for. So I use these folders for any talk I'm giving, whether it's on campus, in town, or out of town. And you can see that most of these events represent that kind of thing. I also use it for my research group conference calls, which I chair. And so I get a lot of correspondence about every meeting, and I need to be able to get quickly to agendas and that sort of thing. So here's how I create these folders. As soon as I commit to an event where I'm presenting or attending out of town, I make the folder right away. So I think right now, I think I have one of these folders that goes out to, I don't know, the spring of 2022, because I've committed to do a workshop someplace. So I just make the folder right away. And then it's available now for me to put any email that comes in about that event. So that one is straightforward. I put vacations on here so that any email around that can go in there, because I do personal stuff in the same system. You don't have to do that, obviously. Now, for my research, I do my research group meetings slightly differently. Now, I know when every single research meeting conference call is scheduled for the next year. And so you might be thinking, does she really go in and set up all of these twice a month meetings for 12 full months? I do not. They're on my calendar. I know they're coming. What I do for those meetings is, as soon as I receive the first email about that meeting, which is often the agenda from our coordinating center, but it could be somebody sending me a note about something that's going to happen, I create the folder at that minute, because now I have an email to put in it. And then as soon as I'm done with that meeting, because all of the material is available someplace else, I just delete the whole folder. Now, you might wonder, what do you do with all these other folders? Well, you can either delete the whole thing if you don't need any of the messages, or you can move them to a different location in your filing system. So for example, I keep all of the talk related folders, and I have talk folders going back to 1998, actually. So it provides a repository for me of all of that information, and I can go back and look and see what I talked about and that sort of thing if I need to refresh my memory. Now, let me make a point here, and then this applies to the next folder as well, which is the project associated messages. An email does not go into this folder, one of these folders, until I have completed whatever action needs to be done. I have replied, I have done the task, I have moved the task into my to-do list, and so I don't need a reminder of it in my inbox. So all I need to do is save the email for storage for reference purposes. It's not for messages I haven't dealt with yet. But so once I've dealt with it, then the email is dragged over into the appropriate folder. So that's the calendar event associated messages. And then, oh, and this is unnecessary to say probably, but maybe just to reinforce, I don't use this for deadlines. I only use it for actual things that are on my calendar, events that occupy time. That's what goes, not deadlines. That's just the way I do it. Okay, now the project associated messages. This would be for anything that you consider a project that you're currently working on that's going to have email associated with it. So that will almost always be writing projects and grants and any kind of committee work that you're doing where you're producing a report. You'll know what those are once you have your project list in mind. And then as soon as I have a project that will have an email, I just create a subfolder for it. And I make the name exactly the same name that's on my list, and that will sort alphabetically. So by looking at my list, I can immediately go to the folder. I don't use different names. Otherwise, it would be confusing for me to figure out what goes where. So I think that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so we've talked about my folder structure. You need to come up with one, obviously, that works for you. But the big principle would be to maybe think about cutting back on the specific folders that you have, the little tiny ones, and maybe go for bigger ones and start learning more about search. If you decide you're going to do that, my suggestion is that you don't deconstruct your old folder system, but rather you just start the new approach right on top of what you already have. And then as you pull up messages that you need out of the old system that you want to save going forward, you can transfer them into the new system. Okay, so now let's talk about processing. Remember, processing means reading enough of it, as much of an email as you need to decide what you're going to do with it, and then either doing it or storing it for later. So the zero inbox method, it takes a lot of criticism. If you email it, you'll find as many messages that say, or blogs that say, don't do this, it can't work, it won't work, it's not even a good idea. I get all that. The method's been around for about 20 years. I learned it at that time when I hardly got any emails, and I've continued to use it into the current time in jobs where I had very big email and was able to do it. So I don't think that you can't do it. Part of the criticism is, I think, around a misunderstanding of what this method involves. So if you think about how would I get my inbox empty by the end of the day or by the end of the week, maybe you won't pick a daily empty, maybe weekly would probably be good enough for most people to get the benefit out of it. So the first thing you cannot do is simply delete everything that's still in there at the end of the day or the week. Of course, that's not what I mean. It also doesn't mean taking a message that's about a problem with John, and you have a folder problem with John, and so you don't really look at the message, you just put it over in that folder. So you would put it like directly into a project folder, but not really know what it is. That's not what this means either. The method demands that you look at the email and figure out what you need to do before you move it anyplace. The final thing, though, and this is the critical part, which I've already said, but I want to just put this embed this in your mind in what the inbox zero method really means. It doesn't mean you have to reply or do the work the first time you read the message. It does not. It simply means you know what the work is, and now you put it someplace or mark it in such a way that you can come back to it later. So when you finish with this process, if you processed your like 2 days worth of messages or even 1 day using this method, you would feel confident that you have not missed anything. Every important message you've gotten, you know kind of what your work is laid out for you. You've gotten rid of things that you don't need to be in your inbox anymore that are just represent clutter at this point, things that should be deleted or filed or optional reading. And so the stress reduction from knowing that you've seen everything and made decisions is really hard to describe until you've tried it. Now, for people that really want to do this and give it a try, a method that you can do that might help you sort of kickstart the method is to basically move your entire inbox, move it someplace else. And so the method that I have taught people and at one time used myself is to create in Outlook. You would create an alternate inbox called inbox messages before whatever the date is you pick that you want to move everything. And then you move your inbox in there. You can select the whole thing and move it. And then you can just move back the last 1, 2, or 3 days worth. And then you're ready now with a manageable set of messages that you can deal with. And I've laid out the exact instructions here if you want to try that. It's also possible to do this in Gmail. And I have instructions, if anybody wants more information about this, I can send you some links. Now, when people do this, they want to know, well, what about all those old messages? Well, the first thing is that any email message you receive has a sort of a natural decay curve over which it becomes increasingly less likely that it's worth answering or reading. For some messages, it's pretty fast, maybe a couple of days, and for others, it may be 2 or 3 weeks. But my experience, so I have experience sitting with people at their computer and working backwards through one of these backlog inboxes, starting with the most recent one and moving backwards. And 100% of the time when I've done this, when we hit about 6 weeks and nothing further shows up after that, really, that's worth looking at. And so what I tell people is that if they're concerned, they can over time just go in there and work backwards until they get to about 6 weeks or so when it seems like they're not seeing anything anymore. Alternatively, you can just let things sit there and then go find them when you need to. So if someone reminds you about something, most people find that they hardly ever have to go back into that box once they've cleared out the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks worth. And then you can just let them sit there. You don't have to delete them. Okay, so that's the backlog method you might want to try. Now, the next thing to think about is what are the kinds of things you typically have to do with the messages? What's the range of things that you would do with the emails that you receive? And it turns out that the categories of things is pretty limited. There aren't that many things on the algorithm of how to respond to what to do with this particular email. So these would be a standard set. You may have some particular kind of thing that's unusual for your work that you would want to add to this, but either you're going to delete the message if you delete, if you don't, you just archive it, or it's information that you want to save in general, you can just archive it, or it's information about a particular calendared event or project or whatever your special folders are that you have, and then you would move it there. So you just file in both of those cases, or it's optional reading, and then you can either read it and be done with it or move it into optional reading. Some of you may have things that you really have to read. I personally treat those as a new work to do. So I don't have a separate folder for those, but you could do that if you wanted to, kind of a read and review folder. If you wanted to add that in, if you get a lot of stuff like that. Or it may be that this message needs to be sent to somebody else. You're either delegating it for them to do the work or you're handing it off to somebody else. And then what's left after all of that is there's a reply that you need to make, or there's new work for you to do. Those are the 2 remaining categories of email, and those are the ones that take up the time in order to complete what needs to be done. So I've just recently come to the realization through experience with coaching clients and their email. in realizing that you need to have two different options about how you're going to deal with email during the day. One of them would be a session where your intent is to get as close to empty as you can. So you have some time to set aside or time available to you to actually do complete processing and to get each message to its final, either final or temporary resting place. That is either filed, deleted, or into I need to do this later. So that's one a kind of processing. But the other is a triage system where you will go in during the day with very little time available to you, looking for things that need to be handled immediately, and then triaging the others to come back and look at and process later. So I'm going to describe my full processing method first, and then how I do triage, or an idea about how you could do the triaging, because that's what you're going to do during the bulk of the day, is the triaging part. And as I've suggested, that getting to empty doesn't, if you're going to use that method, when I say get to empty, I really remember the translation of that is actually having looked at every message so that you're not missing anything. That's really what I mean by empty, whether you use the literal taking it out of your inbox or not. So I think daily is ideal if you can do it, but at least weekly, so you can fit your emptiness somewhere in that range. And then triage, this is during the day when you determine the number of times you need to go in and look, because of, you may have received something that needs to be handled immediately. Okay, so here's my full processing method. I'm going to describe it in three parts so that you can read the writing, I guess. So here's what I do. So I'm sitting down right now. I've got a half an hour or 45 minutes at my disposal, and I'm going to try to get my inbox emptied, or as close to empty as I can get in the time I have available. So I make one pass of every message, looking at every message in the inbox, and delete when I can, based on either the subject or sender, without opening the message. So any message that's obvious to me, I can delete without opening. I do it. So that will often minimize, lower the volume quite a bit for me. My next pass is my work round. And here I use, I guess, what I would describe as an assembly line approach. So I open each message in turn. I usually start with the most recent one. You could start with the last one. I pick most recent just because somebody's happy then, they heard from me right away. But really it's because I catch conversations at the end instead of the beginning. And so it saves me a lot of time in strings that have developed. At any rate, either way will work. So, and critically, that means I don't skip around. So an approach I used to use is that I'd finish one email and then I'd go back to my inbox and I would look around for the next one to deal with. This one looks terrible, I'm going to set that aside. This one looks easy, let's do that. And after each one, I'd have to go back and look. And that, it turns out, wastes a lot of time and creates more anxiety, because now you know those ones that you're ignoring, and your brain kind of says, what's going on here? So I just do them like an assembly line. Now, to facilitate that, I have my Outlook set up just like you could, so that when I have a message open and then I either delete it or file it, the next message, once it's immediate, the next message opens up automatically. So to do that, if you were interested in trying it, you go into the, you pick the file in the upper left-hand corner of the very top of your program, pick File, and then go to Outlook Options, which is at the bottom of the left-handed box, pick Mail, and then scroll all the way to the bottom of the Mail page. And you will see almost at the very bottom, 3 lines up, there is a command after moving or deleting an open item with a drop-down box. You can pick either open the previous item or open the next item. And I pick next because I'm going from recent to past. If you're going in the other direction, you pick the other option. Now, The first set of things we've already talked about, so I'll just remind you where I put those things. So now I have a message open. If I'm going to delete it, I just delete it and the next one pops up. Or I'm going to archive it, I archive it, and then the next one pops up. I just use that archive icon that I showed you on the ribbon. Or I'm going to save it, I just move it to the project folder it belongs in, using the move command that's available to you in a couple different places when the message is open, and it'll take me to that folder. And then the next one pops up. And then optional reading items, the same thing. I usually try to skim them just to see if they're really even worth keeping. And if they're not, then I delete them. But if I want to spend more time in them, I move them to optional reading. And then delegating, I would forward the message. And then I would, if I need to follow up with it, I need to be sure that thing happened. I would go to sent items and or copy myself on the message so that that delegated item is in my waiting for folder. Now we're left with replies and new work to do. I'll tell you in a minute why I have separated these into two separate categories, because at first it may seem to you like they're really the same thing. So a reply required means the purpose of this email being sent to you is to get you to respond with something, the answer to a question, an opinion, information that someone wants. A reply, a decision, a reply is needed. That is why the email was sent, and that's all you have to do is to reply. Now I know that some emails are a mix of these two kinds, but most of what you get actually that you need to work on are pure replies. So what I do is say to myself, would it be better if I talk to this person rather than sending them an email? And then if that's the case, I reply, seems like we need to talk, and here's when I could do it, or however. And I do that in a couple of situations. One, you're probably familiar with that message that asks you for a very complicated answer. And you think, oh, I'm going to send this, and I know they're going to be right back at me with questions and so forth. And so sometimes in those cases, instead of doing the email, I'll just say, and then we talk. And then all that back and forth can happen in the course of the phone conversation. The other one, and this comes from my years in faculty affairs and then the Ombuds office, if I detect in that message that's come to me some hostility or tension in the nature of the question that's being asked, those are rarely a good idea to respond to in email, because the rule is that it's impossible to accurately convey tone in any email. You may be misinterpreting the tone, but I can guarantee you if they're really upset, whatever you send them will be misinterpreted as being rude, hostile, etc. And so the only way you can really insert tone into that response is by talking in person, preferably, but now with Zoom or at least on the telephone. Okay, so that's that. That's my conflict reduction mitigation advice for you today. Now, here is the set. Now, I know there's a lot of stuff here, but the second big thing, aside from not just checking your email so often, is when you are processing email, to reply to as many messages as you can immediately. I want you to think about pushing yourself on this. Instead of reading everyone and saying, well, really, I'll do that later, or that would be quick, but it's not very important to do now, so I'll just do that later. This is where the big giant backlogs of emails are created. I force myself to reply as if it's going to take me a minute. I have to check my calendar. I have to think for a minute about a decision. If I can do it in 2 minutes, might be a little, I don't use that as a literal guideline, but if I can do it in 2 or 3 minutes and have the time to do that, I reply as often as possible. And I can just tell you that gets messages out of your inbox. It prevents you from missing deadlines, and it prevents you from holding up other people's work or your own work because someone's waiting for you before you can get back to them about reply. Just that is my biggest message actually today. And then for the ones that I cannot reply to right away, and of course there are lots of legitimate reasons for that. It's too complicated. You really don't have time, even though it's quick. You can do a number of different things. If you use a system where you keep message, you have to have a system for where you're going to keep deferred emails. And so what I do is I keep them in my inbox, but I mark them. I actually use the categorize function for this, which I'd be happy to demonstrate if you want to see what that looks like. But flagging works just as well. Or some people actually use a folder that they label in that series of ampersand or the @ folders called action required. And they just move everything over there, and then they can go into that folder and do work later. You just have to decide what system will work best for you. Okay, so now the second category is new work to do. Now, here's why I think about this as a separate category. These are messages sent to you to say you need to do something. It's a task, quick, a task kind of medium, like your resident evaluations are overdue. You need to go into the system and do them, that kind of thing, tasks. And some of them are actually brand new projects. Like you receive an invitation to do to write a chapter, and you send off your yes, I'll do it, and then back comes to you this big email filled with instructions and so forth. So now you have a project. That kind of work, in particular project work, is not necessarily managed well out of an inbox. And here is the reason why. Replies are usually wanted pretty quickly, within a day or two at the most. There's an urgency about them, not an urgency, not an emergency, but an urgency about keeping that moving. But new work to do, unless it's something that truly has like a deadline of tomorrow, that work often we prioritize over all of our other work that's sitting out here on a project list or a task list. Because it comes to us by email, we think, well, we have to do that work first. And that is wrong. That is just new work like any other new work that you have. And ideally, you will be prioritizing the timing of doing it in the context of all the work you have to do. And that is one of the reasons why especially new projects that come to you should not be managed out of your inbox, just sitting in your inbox. Now, what I would do with those is I would put them into my project system, and then I would create a folder in my projects associated messages email folder. And then I would put that message I received into the project folder where it belongs. And I would manage that project then out of my project system, to-do system. Okay, now, however, I treat small quick tasks just like I do quick emails. I try to do them right away. So because a lot of them are fast, and those I will leave in the inbox system that I have until I finish them. It's the bigger ones that are going to require multiple steps and so forth that I want. I want you to think about getting them out of your inbox. Okay, now here is a triage process using flags. So you're sitting down, you've got 5 minutes, and you're going to look through what's in your inbox. So you're going to do the same delete thing because you want to get rid of all that stuff. And then you're going to look at each of the remaining messages. And if something looks like it may need your attention, you're going to flag it. You're not going to open and read it. You're just going to flag it. And then if you come across one that does appear urgent based on who sent it or the subject line, you can open that one and do what you need to do. And then if you have more time, you can go back and go to those flagged messages and open them and see what's there. But sometimes all you'll have time to do is delete, scan, flag, and process urgent. And then you'll come back to those flagged messages later when you have a bigger amount of time to go through the full processing method that we just talked about. Now, one of the big breakthroughs I made in my own email efficiency, that is getting replies out the door faster, was recognizing that sometimes I was doing this. I would see a message and it would, I'd open it up. Perhaps this has happened to you. And I go, ooh, not that I'd really read it that carefully, but I could just see at a glance, this was going to be, it felt like it was going to be complicated or painful in some way. And so what I would do then is just quickly close that email. And then I'd maybe look at it again a few days later, and it might sit there for weeks sometimes, because I was just, by now, I was completely averse to even looking at it. The thing that turned me around on this was recognizing that that wasn't working very well for me. I was putting off things that in the end turned out to be simple, and I was delaying on things that were important and really needed to be done in a timely way. So the process I came up with for myself was to do this. When I opened an email like that, first of all, I would force myself to read it through completely instead of just reacting superficially. And then I would ask myself, why can't I do this now? What is preventing me from doing it now? And sometimes it was perfectly obvious. This is a big, huge thing. No way. And it would go into my deferred list. No problem. Sometimes, though, it'd be one of these things. I am so tired of this message string with Jim. I'm just tired of it. Or I am tired of Jim. He is annoying me. I'm just tired of Jim, no matter what he writes to me. Or I'm just tired. I am just tired and I cannot make myself respond to one more email. These are emotional, energetic reasons why you're not dealing with the email. And I think the only thing here is just to recognize what's going on, because once you do, you can either say, well, for heaven's sakes, I know what I need to do. I'll just do it. Or I'm going to take a break on this one and come back to it later today or first thing tomorrow. That's all. So those are handled pretty easily once you recognize what the problem is. But more often what's going on, the reason you're not replying or doing the task is you can't do it without doing something else first. You have to read something, you have to talk to somebody, you have to check something out, you have to make a decision. So there's a little mini task list. It might just be one thing you have to do before you're in a position to actually reply. And what I want you to do is think about what is the very next thing you need to do to be able to work toward being in a position to reply to this email. So here's an example. You've received a message from David, who runs a fund to save penguins in the Antarctica, and he's asked you for a $6 million contribution. And you're kind of thinking about it, but you just can't figure out why you can't respond right now. And then you realize that you need to check your bank account. And then you remember that you need to change your password on your bank account. So the next thing you need to do is change your password, and then you need to check your bank account. And I'd add a third step, which would be to check with whoever lives with you at home who has also some stake in that money. Then you'll be ready to reply. But you get the idea that you want to think about, what do I need to do next? Now, once I started doing that, it was like a miracle. Even complicated messages didn't prove to be so more complicated once I broke it down into the next step. So think about that. Now, we've talked about deferred email, and I've suggested some places you might do it, but here's kind of the full set. The first thing you could do is you could have a system in your email, a folder system, where you put messages. Some people have their whole system around this, and they'll have one that says messages I need to do today, messages that I can do later. And you could have a third one that says messages that I really haven't looked at yet, but I think I need to read them more carefully. So that would be my need more processing. I know I need to take action today. I know I need to take action, but it doesn't have to be today. So some people's whole system revolves around moving messages into those three boxes and then going back and working in the action boxes, working through those. So you could do that. Or you could put the new work in particular or complicated replies into a to-do list system. There are many of the to-do list apps have the ability to forward emails into them. And so if you have one of those apps and that's what you use as your to-do list system, it gives you the opportunity to move that message into your regular to-do list system really easily, and then where it can be prioritized and dealt with. So I use Evernote for my to-do list system, and I can do that with Evernote. So I just zip it over there. You can do it on a handwritten one, and then you might want to have a way of marking those. So you could have another folder that says emails that I have moved into my to-do list system, so you know where the original email is located. So that could be your complete set. More processing needed to decide, action needed today, action needed sometime, emails moved to my to-do list system. And that would take care of everything. Now, the other one, and the one that I have actually always used outside of the work that goes to the to-do list, is to keep replies I need to make in my inbox, because for me, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But I segregate them from unprocessed messages. I use categories. But using flags is super simple, and you could start doing that right away and decide if that system works for you, and then stick with that, or you could switch to a different system if that's not working so well. If you're using the web version of Outlook, there's a pin option where if you pin it, it will pop up to the top of the inbox, and it'll just stay there until you move it. So that would be a way of segregating it. I would probably flag those as well, just because I think they'll turn a different color. They'll turn yellow. So you'll have pinned and flagged. And in Gmail, you can use labels, which most of you probably don't do. There's a question about to-do list apps. Let's save that. You'll not be surprised to know I have opinions about everything, so. Okay, now if you're using flags, if you think, well, I want to do this, and I think I'm just going to do the simplest thing to begin with. I'm going to start by using flags. So first you need to, it's ideal if you have the flag column visible to you in your inbox, and you can see it's there on the far right-hand side. And then all you have to do is click flag. And I would suggest when you're starting to do this, just use the first one available. Don't go, there are like 7 different time frames and stuff. Just pick one and just stick with it. So just click it, and whatever that first one is the one you want to use. Now, the key to using flags effectively in the inbox is to always sort on flags. So you sort on that column every time it's time to work in your email, to do processing, because what I've seen so many times is people who do use flags for messages they need to get back to, but they never sort, so they don't even know what's in there anymore, because once the messages have fallen off the screen into multiple pages, I found people who, I say, well, what are you going to be using that flag for? It's for urgent messages. I say, okay, so let's sort. And it turns out they have like 600 flagged messages because they just didn't realize that they were going to forget about them. But if you just sort by flag to get them at the top, then you'll always be able to see what's there. And then you go in when you're in your workaround and you deal with all of those flagged emails. Now, in the very newest version of Microsoft 365, which you may or may not have at this point, when you flag an email, and then it actually, when you flag the email just like you normally would, and then in some of the versions, it will actually highlight it yellow. I like that feature very much. But then when you sort by flag, instead of just pulling them up to the top of a list, it actually creates 2 categories for you. So a category called follow-up flag, and then the messages will be there, and then you can open and close that. So you can, if you don't want to look at those, you can close it. And the unflagged items are all the items you haven't processed yet. So you can go back and forth, but you can just stay in this mode, in fact. And then when you flag something in the unflagged section, it will just pop up to the top list. So this is very similar to actually what I do with my category system. So if you have this available, this is a little more elegant, but the other method will work just fine without where you're just flagging and sorting. Okay, so we've come to the end now, and we've got 25 minutes left. So I see one question here, but I wonder if other people, I don't know if people could be unmuted to ask questions or if they all go in the Q&A. I'll leave it up to.
If anyone wants to use the hand up function and they put their hand up, then I can go ahead and unmute them so they can ask their question.
Let me just say one thing. I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed by, what I've tried to do is give you sort of the principles and a complete system that would allow you to do it. But my system may not be the one that works for you. So just pick and choose the pieces that sound good to you right away, and then add things in. Okay. Yes, I will definitely go in live and show you my category system. And as for the to-do app, I was thinking in the last session, there was a slide that had that information in it, which the questioner may not have attended. If you want to use a standalone third-party or an app that will be available on your phone just for tasks, if you have an iPhone, you have one called Reminders. I don't know if you can forward emails to that one. Microsoft To Do, which is a newer app that Microsoft now offers, does allow you to forward emails to it. And then most of the other proprietary ones that are fairly sophisticated allow you to do that. The one that I particularly like is called Toodle-Do. It's kind of a silly name, but it's a really robust program that lets you manage projects and the tasks associated with them, along with and being able to look at the 2 things separately. So you can look at a list of your projects, and you can look at all your tasks, including the ones that are project related and not, and you can it has a very slick way of prioritizing your tasks. So Toodle-do, and you can forward emails to that one. The freeform programs like OneNote and Evernote allow you to transfer emails into them, and Evernote is what I use. So those are just some ideas that you might think about. And if anybody wants more specific information about that, if you send me what your needs are for a list, I can send you back, I can respond to you with some ideas about what you might try. So while we are, let's see, let's go back to share, and let's go into, and here we'll hope there's nothing like really private in my inbox. So so I manage 3 different email accounts. I have my university account, I have a private Outlook account, and a Gmail account, and I keep all of them at 0. But remember, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I don't even have to think about how to handle things. Okay, so let's see how how this categorized system would work. So let's say that this message is one that I want to, just that I need to get there we go. I need to get my, I want to put that in my let me get, okay. So, okay. All right. So here, if you look up in the ribbon, when you have your inbox open, here is the categorize feature. And these are the folders that I have, and all the ones that I use to organize email are these top, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. I actually don't use this one anymore. So there's really only 3 of these that I use: process, optional reading, and action required. Okay. So one way to assign, so that's, and if you're going to create folders that you're going to use in your email like this, you want to have some way to pop them up to the top of the list, because you may have lots of categories here that you don't even know about. So I just use that @ sign, and it works perfectly. You could use a numbering system, and that way you can put them in easily put them in the order you want. And then to make a new category, you go down to all categories, and then this is the dialog box, and you just pick new and type in what you want, pick a color. You have lots of nice color choices, then click OK, and then click OK again. And then it's available to you. And you see, because was clicked on an email, it assigned this email to that new category. Well, I don't want that one, of course. So what I'm going to do now, the other way you can assign categories is just right click, and there's a command for this. I'm not sure on a Mac how you would do that, but there is a way to do it so that you can bring up this dialog box. Just go to categories, and if I want to get rid of a category, there we go, it's gone. Now, let's say this is one I want to do, it's optional reading. So I'm just going to click that and see as soon as you use a category in an existing email in your inbox, it appears in your inbox. Okay. Now this one is something I know I need to do something with, because it's a search committee that I'm chairing. So that one I'm going to do need action. And these also, now I can just drag, now that the category is open, I can just drag things up there. So all of these I need to read. There must be some trouble. I'm not looking forward to. I have no idea what's in these, by the way. This is one that I might want to keep. Probably not. I think I'll probably just delete this one. Gone. This one, I'm not sure what that is. So I think I need to process that more, which means I'm not sure I need to do anything with it, but I might. So instead of assuming it's an action, I'm going to put it here. So if I were doing triaging, this is where I would put things that I don't know what they are. I put them in the process. These I know I have to do something. These are optional. And this I know I'd have to process. This one, it's an agenda for a meeting today. All right, I better put that in there. And I don't use ACT, so I'm just going to delete that one. And this one, I'm going to delete that and that. That one I don't care about. And I certainly don't care about my university's data strategy, so for that's deleted. So now I've taken that whole inbox and I've organized it, and I have these action items, and this was optional. Now, another feature that I started using in Outlook is the focused inbox. And you'll notice up here that this says focused and this is other. Now there's a whole bunch of things here that either Outlook thinks I don't really want to need, or things that I've said I don't want to see in my focused inbox. And so if you have that available to you, this is a way of having Outlook do a machine sort for you. And to activate that, you go into the view category here in the Windows version, and in the Mac version, you also get it from a top layer, but I cannot remember where it is. It's easy enough to find. And then all you have to do is just click Show Focused Inbox. And then the Outlook has an algorithm it uses to begin with. So anything that is not addressed personally to you goes in there. Things that look like ads and so on and so forth. It's different than spam. Spam still exists on top of this. So what you can do if you have something that, let's say that I don't want to see Google alerts anymore in my focused inbox. If you right click on an email and go down to in this dialog box, it allows you to move in this case, the message to other, because it's already in focus, or I can say, I never want to look at this one anymore in others. So you train the algorithm over time. And I used to think that this was kind of a pain in the neck, but I actually think it works pretty well. So if you have the focused inbox, and as long as you're taking the time to move things, you can do pretty well. And then for the other, this will be a bunch of stuff that I probably don't care about. And I just go through these one at a time, and I'm pressing the delete key now to get rid of these. So this one, no, because occasionally something will show up in here that I want to see, but it doesn't take me very long to do that. Look at that one, might be good for me to read because it's okay, I don't care about that or that or that or that or that. Okay, so that was a simple thing to screw. I almost never have to open anything there. And so I not have this here, and now I can just add that to optional reading. Okay, so now I've cleaned out my whole inbox for you. And about, how long did that take? 5 minutes. And now I'm ready to work. I go in and work on each one of these. So that's how I use categories. And the reason I like this over flagging is because it allows more differentiation about what I'm looking at. I can do the processed. I haven't really read it yet, but I think it's something important. I know I have to do something, and I can have those all sitting in an inbox. And then when I don't want to look at those, now anything that comes in, of course, will be here as an unflagged item, and that's what I have to process. So I hope that was enough. Now, the only other feature that you need to know about if you're going to use this method is to change your view so that it view by category. So you see this big box here in the middle. This is all the different ways that you can organize your data. So if you go by date, that would be the usual way you get stuff, right? It's in the order that it was received with the most recent thing first. That's what your email maybe looks like right now. Or you can organize it by from, there's all these, or you can do flag status. And what do we have? I don't have any flags, so that won't be very helpful to us. But what you want to pick is categories, and then it automatically switches. And I just leave it in that view all the time. There's no reason for me to go out of it.
Susan, there was one question in the Q&A about what are your suggestions for dealing with blood?
Let's go to that. This is a really great question. Okay. So I would say junk is different than, well, the definition of junk means you just never want to see that again, no matter what it's about, right? I mean, that's what junk is. And it's different than, so what are okay. So you probably know that there are ways to try to divert this stuff out of your inbox. And I think if that's a problem, that's what you should do. The way I've chosen to deal with that, I never used to divert at all. I was just a fast deleter. but I appreciate that not having that stuff come in can be life-saving. And so switching for me, when I switched over to the focused inbox, that basically took care of it for me, because then it just takes me about 30 seconds to even get rid of like 50 things. It's not a big deal. But nonetheless, so what are the options you have here? One thing that you can do is unsubscribe. Now, some of you have probably tried this strategy, and you know that not only does it not just not work, sometimes it actually leads to more emails. And so my rule is that if I unsubscribe and then they want to ask me for my email address to confirm it, I just stop. And so what you can do is you can right click and instead make that you can go down again, right click or whatever you do in a Mac to get to this, where you can make something junk. You can, and then you have options. You can, and this is probably the best way to do it. You can block the sender or send it to junk mail. I think those are the simplest way to do it in Outlook. That's the filtering technique that you can use. And I think if I were going to do this, I wouldn't, because you could spend an entire day just dealing with so I would do a few at a time, and so that you're not spending a lot of time at any one time doing this. Or maybe if you're on a boring conference call where you really don't have to pay attention and no one will be calling on you, then that would be a good time to do that, is to go through and just block things or turn them into junk. Now, Anjum says there are so many, it would take a significant amount of time just to do that. I'm assuming maybe you're referring to this other category. I appreciate that. So if that really feels like that's true, it is possible to, I think, delete the whole batch at once. So I think you don't even have to, let's see if I have it. I don't think I have anything in here. There aren't going to be any messages there. I think if you're in the other category, you could do Control-A to select all and delete them all at one time. So that just takes a quick glance for whatever's there. But if it's really a lot, then you need to engage in this gradual reduction using the block sender and yeah.
If there aren't any other questions, I think that we will wrap it up for today. I really want to thank Dr. Johnson for her presentation and showing us new ways to use Outlook. This is really useful. I want to remind everyone that on April 21st, we'll have Dr. Johnson's final presentation, Becoming a More Productive Writer. And just a reminder that the materials will be posted on the available through the Pathology and Immunology Office of Faculty Development website. So Dr. Johnson, thank you again for your great presentation today, and we'll see everyone again on April 21st.
Thanks a lot, Anne.